Welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Robert Winters.
Judy Nathans.
And today is the Ides of January.
The 15th?
Actually, I don't know. You know, there's the Ides and
I thought it was the Ides of March. I didn't know there's Ides of January.
There's actually, the way it worked was there's
Yeah.
the Ides and the Owens. And I think
It's every 3 months.
it's either the 15th or the 13th, depending on the month.
Yeah.
And then the Owens, I think, is like the, I don't know, 7th. I'm just talking nonsense there.
Really.
Right? But
Okay.
anyway, if March 15th is the Ides of March, and that's a
This
31
is the
day,
Ides of
this could be
January,
the Ides of
right, whatever.
January.
All right.
So, you want to be careful of somebody named Brutus.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I think we're already living whatever that
Yes,
is now.
yes. So I think it would be, we would be remiss if we did not mention the rather significant fire that took place yesterday morning.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a great day when you wake up and you hear the sound of helicopters. And I woke up to the sound of
Yeah,
helicopters.
people were noticing that.
And then
yeah.
you sort
I
of-
did not hear them.
You go to the window and you go,
neighborhood,
I don't
yeah.
see the smoke where I am in
Yeah.
mid-Cambridge, but there's got to be something going on. And then, sure enough, you tune into the news or Twitter or whatever, and then
Why'd
that's
you
how
think it
find
was a fire?
out. I don't know that I initially thought it was fire. I thought it could be some sort of crime thing, but it was
Yeah.
early enough in the morning
That's true.
that
right.
usually
Right.
the banks aren't open, so it,
Yeah, it's
it
not going to
wasn't
be
a
really.
bank
Yeah,
robbery.
you're right. Yeah.
You know, so you know, it could be some
Could have been a
horrible-
massive accident.
Could have been something
Yeah,
like that.
but you're right.
yeah.
At that hour in the morning.
Or they're they're chasing a fugitive from yard
Yeah.
to yard to yard. That actually happened one time a few
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
They caught the guy over, I think, in Somerville or something, by Foss Park
Hmm.
or something like that.
So this was it? They said 19 people were displaced, although
It's
three
actually- it's
additional
over-
people weren't home.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's
So
22 people.
22
have been
people now,
displaced.
right? The buildings really.
Two
They're
buildings.
actually when you look it up on the city's assessors database, it's 6 Hunting Street.
And then
Street.
851 Cambridge Street.
Yeah, so it's actually there's
It's like on the
two.
corner.
It's listed as 2 separate properties,
But
they're
are they
really-
owned by the same person?
Actually, all 3 are owned by the same.
What's the third?
Well, as I say,
Okay.
this frontage on Cambridge Street is actually
Right.
listed as 2 separate.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so
structures, even though they're
that
attached.
parcel is kind
Yeah,
of okay.
yeah, and then the other one around there.
And was there some renovation going on? I heard.
I don't know if there was renovation going on. You know, I did notice that it. You know, when you look it up in the assessor's database, it gives the owner's name, and also Cambridge tax title, which usually means they're back on taxes a bit. So, and that could be.
Wait, it means that they're back. What do you mean
They
they haven't
haven't.
paid?
They're in arrears. Now that could mean that they wrote a check for $1,000 and the bill was $1,050 and they.
So we don't know, but that's
You
usually
don't know.
listed. Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
So I don't know what to make of it. The word is, I mean, I had heard unofficially that the buildings might have to come down, and then
Right, at least
so I
one of
wasn't going to
them.
say anything about that, except that
Yeah.
I heard on the news today they were sort of making it more official that it is now likely that
That
the
the
buildings
whole-
would have to come down.
Both of them. Wow.
Yeah.
Oof.
You know, it bothers me only because when you actually look at some of these old
Yeah.
buildings, I mean, you know, maybe what's going on inside the buildings was not super spectacular. I mean, the Sunset Cafe's been around forever.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you know, it's the brickwork of the facades of these buildings are really kind of neat and.
Yeah, but the insides, they said, were like a lot of stuff that had been done over the years and
Yeah,
partitions.
you know, so sometimes what you can do is you can prop up the outer walls and you can
Yeah.
rebuild a building and then have it still look the same. That would be great, but on the other hand, it's also hard to do that, and I can understand that if they just have
Did
to
you
take
read
it down.
something? I read it in the Globe, I think, that there was a call put into the fire department at 12:41 a.m. about some unknown smell or something, unknown odor, and they went out to investigate, and I guess didn't find anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm curious to see if that somehow gets related.
Yeah, it'd be nice,
But
if, you know, when you do the
It's just
full
odd that you'd
investigation.
have 2 calls
Yeah.
5 hours apart.
Yeah,
I don't
you know,
know.
one thing I think city manager pointed out, but several other people pointed out as well last night at the city council meeting, not only during the council discussion, but also out in the hallway, just how extraordinary it is, a job that the fire department can do, where you have, a lot of buildings are very, very close together in
Yes.
Cambridge.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, there were other buildings that were just a few feet away that didn't sustain any damage at all.
Yeah.
So their ability to actually contain the fire, you know, I mean, they kind of have to get trained to do that because
Yeah.
you could end up with a gigantic catastrophic fire.
They were lucky. I don't think it was that windy, so that
Wasn't
helped.
that windy,
It was very
right?
cold. Yeah.
But you know, the thing is that when you've got buildings close, you can have one catches another, catches another. You could build a firestorm.
Yep.
You know, create its own wind. You could create an incredible catastrophic event. So you know,
Well, that kind of happened at Berkshire. I mean, that actually
but
caught a lot of
but the
buildings
wind
caught
really,
fire.
really
That's what I'm
accelerated
saying.
that one.
Right.
Yeah,
So we're lucky
we
in
didn't
this
have
respect.
that.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting that this particular fire was within sight of the Berkshire Street fire. You just
Oh,
look right
wow.
across. You
That's
know,
a good
the
point. You're
Ontario
right.
point. Yeah,
Jeez.
it's like really it's a block and a half away.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So you know, anyway, the mayor, what is it called? It's like
The mayor's emergency assistance fund, or there.
Yeah.
I think if you
So
go
there's
to the city website or Mayor McGovern's website, and it is privately funded, so it's not city monies that are.
right. So any of the
Yeah.
restrictions about aid to individuals from tax money is
Right. It's not.
not the issue here.
Right.
You know, it's interesting. I think it was either Mark McGovern or Denise Simmons pointed out last night that for this one, it was very easy to just sort of get that whole apparatus back in place because just 2 years ago, when they had the Berkshire Street fire, they had set up this whole infrastructure for dealing with you know, donations coming in,
So
disbursements,
and that exists.
taking care of everybody. So they pretty
Yeah.
much just had to kind of ramp it back up again,
So
and
they
they kind
never
of knew what they were
dismantled
doing.
that
it.
because it's going to be there for these kinds of situations.
Yeah, but the interesting thing was that the fund actually existed before the Berkshire Street fire.
Oh.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that was the one that may have been. It was set up by a previous mayor. It's called the Mayor's such and such Fire Relief Fund, right?
Assistance is the word
But,
in there. Yeah.
but it was set up during another fire some years ago, and I couldn't remember which one it was.
Yeah, I don't think it's just for fires, but again.
No, actually, I think it is.
Oh,
But it was set up when there was another fire, and I can't remember if it was one on Broadway or it was one.
Oh, in Alston?
No.
No,
this is
no,
it's
I'm sorry,
on
Alston Street.
No,
Yeah,
no,
that-
that's much too recent. No, this was actually set up many years ago,
Okay.
and it was when the Berkshire Street fire was set up. They said, "Well, we already have this fund. It exists. It didn't have any money in it, but the thing
I
is, it
see.
exists." So, so any of the kind of legalities about
Yeah.
setting up such a fund were already available.
Yeah.
They just had to basically dust it off and figure out.
Yeah.
So they did that 2 years ago. So this time it was like real easy to
And
get
there's
it.
only $2,000 in it right now, according to
Well,
Mayor
there
McGovern.
was when
so,
Mayor McGovern made the announcement.
so
hopefully a few
hopefully,
people
yeah,
sent a few bucks.
I'm gonna look into it. Yeah.
So you know, but anyway, it was interesting, and some of the discussion sort of dovetailed into other discussions of a recent catastrophic event. It was in the form of a flooding event when
Right.
Craigie Street, Maine, failed, and it was kind of an interesting trying to marry the two issues that happened at the council last night.
Yeah, which is really not. Yeah, I mean, I think we haven't seen the end of that. So, I mean,
Right.
it's just this question of what. On one hand, the one group of people from Mercer Circle were kind of saying that the first responders were great, everybody was there, but since then that no one has come to ask anything of them or offer anything. Where when these other emergencies happen, it seems like services get kicked in and everything. So
Yeah.
Jan Devereaux did bring this up, and I thought it was kind of brave
Yeah.
of her. She tried to attach some kind of amendment to an existing policy order about the water thing,
Yeah.
but agreed that, all right, it had to be a separate issue. But I think it is, I thought about it last week when I heard it's like,
Sure.
is it because it's 02138 and it's their private homeowners or whatever? But it is a curious thing about homeowners insurance, because actually, I don't know about yours, but I actually asked someone that owns property. You have to get special riders to cover those situations, because when it's a city or something, it's not a natural disaster. If you don't have coverage, you don't have coverage.
Right.
So you have to spend more. I don't know. Do you know about that?
No.
Okay, so that's because one homeowner that testified last night does have that kind of insurance, but apparently a lot of them didn't. So I'm just putting it out
Yeah.
there because it's
But over and
you have to
above
look at your
over and
insurance.
above the financial loss,
Right.
there's also one person who was speaking at council was referencing, kind of priceless, irreplaceable
I know, but what were they doing in
things
the
that were
basement?
lost.
anyway.
Well, you know,
All right, you know what? Okay.
some people
I
just
know.
simply don't anticipate
I
that
understand
an event
that,
like
yeah.
that might one day
But it was
happen.
in stark contrast, because that person in
Yeah.
describing their things
I've been
versus
putting
some
a
of-
lot
yeah.
of things in my basement over this
Well-
past year just because I need to get it out of my
Well,
apartment.
Get it
But
out of there.
but
Yeah.
the thing is that anything that was really valuable,
Yeah.
you know, something from my father or whatever, that would never go down the basement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
So,
just, you put, if it's that valuable, I think it should be in a safe deposit box. But that's me,
All right.
you know, whatever. So
then they'll
I-
rob the bank.
I think there will be some not hearings or some public meetings about the whole infrastructure question, right?
Yeah, so that's maybe that
To
needs
me,
to be
that's the-
clarified. Okay,
yeah.
so you've got on the one hand there's a catastrophic event like a fire versus a catastrophic event like a flood. The city responds
Not
to
caused by
one,
natural events, but
right?
yeah.
But the city's response and protocols for one were not quite the same as the other. The emergency responders came in both cases,
Yes.
but the thing is, in terms of follow-up from the city,
Well, the Red Cross wasn't there, but then maybe, I don't know when the
So,
Red Cross
I
showed
think
up,
in-
but I think you have renters versus, I don't
Yeah.
know if any of them are owners.
so I think
but yeah.
I think in 2 weeks at the city council meeting, Jan
Right.
Devereaux promised to bring in an order that basically is
she'll
going to
craft
ask and maybe
something,
make some
yeah.
suggestions on how does the city respond just generally to
When it's a s-
emergency manage. How do we do emergency management in the city? Not just in terms of first responders, but in terms of follow-up, you know,
With
sort of
populations,
the
yeah.
shepherding of the people
Yeah.
who have been affected,
Right.
making sure, you know, you've got somebody, almost like a social worker would sort of basically look after them to make
Well,
sure
it seems that
everybody's
it does
moving forward.
happen depending on the community, because it has happened. It happened
Yeah.
with the fire in Cambridgeport. It happened with Berkshire. It happened. So I think we're talking about what happens when it happens, not in a place that you think
Right.
people need help.
I mean,
I don't know.
I think somehow response in the aftermath of fires or something, there's sort of a protocol established,
Good
but
point.
maybe some of those same protocols could or should be used for other kind of catastrophic events as well.
I mean, Tim Toomey brought up that there have been 2 water main breaks in East Cambridge. One, I guess,
Right.
in this past 2 years, right?
right. So I think he was
yeah.
trying to make the point that you
Yeah,
know if you're
her-
going to go and basically now
are you going to
intervene
go
after
back?
the
Or you go,
fact
right, exactly.
for what happened at Mercer Circle,
How far do you go back?
how
Right.
far do you go back, right? And I think that's a legitimate.
So it's
point of
an
view.
issue that's we'll see more of, which I think is important. And then of course Quentin Zondervan had his
Climate change.
climate change, so the floods could happen any day. So,
Chicken Little.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that would actually probably be covered by homeowners because that's a natural event. It's not man-made, right?
True, though the
Although
thing
they
is
would
now
argue.
when you get your homeowner's policy,
Yeah.
there are certain things
It-
you can
that-
accept or not accept.
And I
you know,
think
for
that's
hurricanes and
the
things like
insurance
that.
companies are doing their due diligence. Like, oh,
Yeah.
well, look at PG&E. My God, they're going to go out of business in California.
Yeah, yeah,
because
oh
we're-
yeah. So by the way,
Yeah.
the one thing that was sort of procedurally a little bit problematic about Councilor Devereaux's efforts,
Yeah.
well-intentioned efforts to have the
it was put-
addressing of these
yeah.
city addresses, that it came in as an attempt to amend
amend-
a policy order, which was fundamentally a request for information.
Right.
It was
It
information.
was really different from what the policy order
You're asking
was.
for
Yeah.
information about
Right.
the age of some of the infrastructure of
Right.
the city, and
It needed its own separate
it
policy
really does,
order,
and it will
and she
be,
agreed to that. Yeah.
And I think it's important, actually. I mean, I
Yes.
think sometimes we obsess
Yep.
in this city on certain sort of pet issues,
Yep.
and it actually takes things like fires or floods or whatever to realize, hey, you know, there's actually a lot of other things that are pretty important in the running of a city
Yep.
and the taking care of its
Yeah.
residents.
People don't think about what's underneath the ground. They just
Right.
don't.
That's
you know,
right.
So.
Yeah. Absolutely right.
All
So,
right, so
so
that's
anyway, so that
happening.
was sort of a big thing and a big
Yeah.
part of it. Maybe we'll just dive into some of the other things in the council meeting. One of the things, again, just to sort of deal with the non-issue oriented ones, there were actually some very significant retirements that were.
Oh, true.
Announced
Yeah, I
at
was
the,
shocked actually about Robert Reardon.
Yeah. So, you know, I guess, you know, sometimes I guess maybe I have a little bit of a wind of some things coming, but and
He's
some
such
things
a
you just sort
city
of knew that they
insider,
were going to come in eventually anyway.
Yeah.
But so it was James Cassidy, who used to work in Public Works and then over traffic and parking, retired. Was it I think 53 years of service
My
working for the
goodness.
city. But the two that really sort of jumped out at me, or the people who I knew more personally, were Tim McDonald, who, when I was back in, I can't even remember, it was like either 1986 or 1987. I was appointed really just because I happen to know somebody, was appointed to, it was my first foray into anything having to do with civic thing at all. It was this Water and Sewer Advisory Committee, and I was appointed by then Mayor Al Vellucci, right? And at the time, the Cambridge Water Department was kind of like the forgotten child in some ways,
Before the new structure.
Right. So the thing is, they really did have a pressing need to because there were some federal regulations coming down the pike. And remember, in 1986 or something, we're really only about 4 years out of the time when the city of Cambridge was bordering on junk barn status. Sort of. So it's really like only 4 or 5 years into the Bob Healy administration, right? So, so the thing is, allocation of funds for big capital projects was something that hadn't really been happening in any really significant way up to that point, or hadn't been happening for decades. I think it's probably fair to say, unless there was money coming from elsewhere, like federal money or state money for schools, whatever. If it was just city money just going to do big projects, not really so much. So anyway, what needed to happen is that the finished water supply for the city is up at Payson Park Reservoir. The rules were that they have to cover it. Right. Because of concerns about trihalomethanes, et cetera, et cetera. But, and that's a big ticket item, right? There were other things. The water treatment plant was actually, when it was first built, and I think 1921 was like state of the art, but that was in 1921. And it was kind of falling apart in some ways, and there were some serious catastrophic dangers in just the way they used the chlorination, how it was done. You brought it in liquid chlorine on railroad cars. If ever there was an accident, there would have been a lot of people dead. So a lot of things had to happen. So I was on that committee, and that's when I met Tim McDonald, because he was working within the water department. He may have been sort of, he wasn't managing director, but he was like director of the water operations. So I learned a lot about the water system talking with people like Tim. And we've been friends for over 30 years. So it's like,
he's getting at it a good time.
He's getting at it a good time, I guess, right?
Won't have to answer it.
Well, the thing is, there's a distinction between the water operations, like
True. And actual the structures it goes through.
Yeah, so there's the watershed.
Processing of it,
There's
the watershed,
the
treatment
there's the
facility.
Yeah, the treatment facility itself, the finishing of the water, and then there's the distribution system.
The conduit or whatever, the pipelines.
I mean, the managing director now is Sam Corda, who actually has a real background in the utility industry.
Good.
So he's a good underground guy to have in place.
And he's probably
we're going to need it, right? Yeah. But anyway, it's just hard to see him go. It was great, and I don't know when the date of his retirement is, but
he's done his service.
Well, sometimes they do every month or two. They do a tour of the filtration plant, and Tim often has given them. So I may actually. I mean, I had a hint that this was going to happen because I was just looking at the job listings for the city, and I saw something like director of water operations. I said, wait a minute, that's Tim's job. So he was already listed. They were looking for somebody. So anyway.
So you don't know if he's gone yet.
I don't know. I really don't know.
So they're gonna have to replace him, and then the next big one is
Bob. Robert Reardon, who's the director of assessment, the assessor of the city. Who's he's not only great at his job, but the thing is that this is a guy. If you want to hear stories about Tip O'Neill. And some of the political history, or whatever, he's your man. He's got a lot of great stories. Born and raised in Cambridge kind of guy, and he knows a lot. So for me, he's really, really, really been instructive.
But it's interesting that he also is going out at a time when you're dealing with cannabis, how much money can tax, short-term Airbnb, and maybe the possible real estate transfer.
Yes.
If I were him, I'd say, woof. I'm not gonna go.
It's
it's interesting. It's a different time and a different. It's like and
I think
time to go.
People are now seeming to be warming up to the idea of sort of interweaving politics with the financials.
Ability to tax. Oh, it's happening. Well, it's happening around the country because they want money for most of them. I've been looking at housing because people are being So they went. Where are we going to get more money from?
Right. Now, there's
federal is drying up.
I don't know whether the state will pass enabling legislation or pass anybody's home rules petitions to permit this.
Because you need that Well, right now you need that for the real estate, but sure, Airbnb, it's already now
That's
that's
already
going to
in place,
happen.
yeah.
And cannabis is up to the community, no?
Um,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
it's also, so those two are kind of
Oh, yeah.
already in
Oh,
the
yeah.
pipeline. It's the real estate one that's.
Yeah, but from a
Yeah.
city's point of view, these are just revenue sources. And when the
Yeah.
state gave enabling legislation to allow you to impose a hotel motel tax,
Right,
so that goes into the general fund. The Airbnb, any money that's generated from Airbnb goes into the general fund.
so
And
most
then
of, right now, it's where it gets designated
Right,
is the
but
biggest, but that's
so
on the
that's-
city level too.
Right. Well, but there's an issue. This is, and
Oh,
I
yeah?
think it's a big serious
Okay.
issue.
Oh,
I think,
yeah.
I think there's a good debate, a healthy debate that should happen about
Mm-hmm.
this proposed real estate transfer tax just
Mm.
on its own, right? And then the particulars, like what should the tax rate be? Should there be any exemptions?
Yeah.
Should there be a floor so you only pay transfer tax above and beyond a certain amount?
Right,
How long have you owned the property before you sell it? How much of an
well,
issue should
that's
that
been
be?
coming up somewhere, I guess Boston, the flip tax, they want to put in if it's less than 2 years, you pay another tax.
Right.
We don't,
Yeah.
I don't know
So,
what
so,
ours
th-
is.
so those are all significant issues.
Yeah.
And if it happens, it happens. Okay. One of my biggest concerns about all of those discussions is this idea of earmarking.
Like, where is that money gonna go to?
Yeah. Okay. So the thing is that when you have, and actually somebody wrote a very interesting comment in this Civic Journal forum about this. I saw it a couple days ago, where basically when you come up with a significant revenue source, but then you earmark all of it, let's say, for one particular use, then what you're doing is you're basically taking the elected legislative people out of the process. So in other words, if as priorities change, as budget debate should properly happen, in fact, certain things are just off the table. Like, okay, so there's $50 million now allocated to that, and it's non-debatable. Whereas, all your property taxes, all of that stuff is completely debatable as part of a budget process.
Because it goes into a general
Yeah,
fund.
somebody
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
somebody actually likened it to a problem that happens with the federal government, where you can argue about should we be cutting back on this, and then there's entitlements. There are things that are woven into the budget and unchangeable,
Right,
so that the
security, yeah.
Congress actually can't do anything about them because of that. I don't think that's a great way to do business. I mean, maybe some things should be
But
insulated.
then wouldn't it become so political though then?
Well, it depends, right? So if
Because
something
see,
is,
that would go beyond administrations if it says it's always going to be this way. But if it
Right.
if it changes every time you have an administration, that could be a nightmare
That's
too.
right. So certain things maybe should be sort of
Yeah.
insulated from political processes entirely.
Yeah,
But something like this, where it's very much
right.
when I do have issues. To me, it is not a good idea to earmark any and all monies that are generated through real estate transfers tax solely for the purchase or building of subsidized
Affordable.
housing.
Yeah. What would you do with it?
I would put it into the general fund,
Yeah.
and then I would ask our elected legislators to basically, to get in conjunction with the city manager, to go through a proper debate about what the priorities of the cities are, and if in fact they come out of it, as they may
Yeah.
very well do, and say, well, our highest priority is to to do the subsidized housing, then so be it, right? But the thing is that they should have a say, and it should be reviewable on an annual basis.
But it's the city council themselves that came up as a whole for this real estate transfer fee. So they're already saying we want it to go to, and they've said
Right.
affordable housing.
Right, but the thing is that so if right, so maybe they say that to this year, but
Oh, I
what
think
about
they're
next
gonna-
year? What
I think
about
they're
2
gonna
years
say
from
it
now?
Every year. But okay, I see your
Well-
point. But you know what? Every city that seems to be doing this is designated to affordable housing.
Except
It is
that,
real estate.
right,
so,
except that
anyway.
the state legislator has approved none of it yet.
So you're saying your argument probably will play more weight on the state level.
I'm
right?
actually
Yeah.
considering writing letters to my state legislators
Well, I think you
because
should.
I think that they need to
Yeah.
think about this from the point of view of earmarking.
I mean, they could say, okay, we agree with this, but
Right, we can say,
no
okay,
earmarking.
this would be a
That's a
funding
good point,
source for
yeah.
municipalities, independent of Prop 2.5 limits, perhaps.
True, right?
Right, so
okay.
the thing is that this is something maybe cities and towns would love.
Yeah.
It would also be something that would be far more relevant within the urban core cities, where
true.
it's where a lot of real estate is flipping
The
back and forth,
congestion, yeah.
much more so than out in the burbs. So it
Right.
might be one of those things where you could get suburban legislatures to say, sure, that's great, go
It
ahead.
just doesn't affect
You know,
me.
it doesn't
yeah.
affect us anyway, so yeah, knock yourself
Well,
out.
actually, why wouldn't it affect them? They would make money. Their cities would make money because their real estate's really high.
But
No?
there's just not nearly as much turnover.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, turnover, yeah, but if someone does sell a property, say
Right.
in Weston,
But I know, but that's just just expensive. But the thing is
I
that,
would think they'd be against it, people that lived in those places.
right. I think if you're actually trying to do speculative investment in real estate, you see probably a lot more of that happening.
Okay, and
much
this is
more
what
core
you're
right now.
saying it's aiming at.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
think
but
that's
not
how I think.
That's true, because you know what, I think in Ball, or one of them, it's not owner occupied ones, which I don't think ours says that. I think it says anything over 1.5, you pay a real estate transfer tax, whether you're gonna live in it or not.
Well, of course,
But I don't know. I haven't
the
seen
city
all of it.
hasn't drafted anything yet.
Right, so I'd be
So-
curious to see these details,
I
right?
would be very curious to see the details.
And also maybe we can bring this up later, because I'm confused, is commercial, but now, isn't commercial responsible for linkage fees and all that
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the
You know,
things
I
that I
just
would
don't-
hope a good analysis would do. You remember,
Yeah.
when you sell property, you know, if you have to pay,
Cap-
this particular fee, then you also have to do capital
Capital
gains.
gains, yeah.
Actually, properties above and beyond a certain amount actually is also subject to a tax that goes toward Affordable Care Act. Right?
Oh,
It doesn't
okay.
affect most people in the country,
Huh.
but in some of the
didn't know
in the
that,
area,
yeah.
well, there's an exempt amount. But the thing is
Okay.
that, you know, if
Yeah.
housing is so expensive
so-
around here, you're already into the place where
So is this
it
just
actually counts.
housing or commercial or both?
I think it's when you sell a home. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
alright.
right. So the thing
There's
is,
a lot of issues.
Right.
So it's not like no one's paying anything. Is what you're
that's
saying.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, it's very easy for you know, a city councilor to say, yeah, just give us
Yeah.
more money. We support that because we support wonderful good things here, right? But you do have to do some analysis to sort of
Is
see
a
whether
linkage fee actually in lieu of inclusionary housing when you can't build?
No,
it isn't?
not in
Okay.
Cambridge's setting. It's
All right.
basically, there's a realization that there's an impact from commercial development that may
So even
drive
if you're not
housing
building
costs up, so
unit-
you have to pay.
I see.
That's why they do these nexus studies to determine what the linkage really is.
Oh, okay. All
And
right.
then they
Well,
can only
it's
adjust it
boy.
accordingly
All right.
based on impact.
I
Yeah,
see.
So,
Okay.
Anyway,
well, we'll
so-
maybe get in a little more of
we'll
that.
get into a little more of the weeds
And then
there
also you
shortly.
went to a big meeting this
Yeah, we'll talk
weekend.
about that meeting too. Okay, so see you in a few minutes on Inside Out.